Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Okay, let's get back into it here. I'm going to start with this just kind of quickly. I want to mention some of the geopolitical and domestic political issues specifically pertaining to some of Donald Trump's comments here over the recent days. Again, he caught a lot of flack for the Chinese comments and the farmland comments, and then, of course, the 500,000 Chinese students coming to the United States and being allowed to study here at colleges and universities and so on and so on. And then at the same time, May 17th here, as I'm recording this, is Rededication Day, or rededicating again our land to God and that we are one nation under God. I find all of this interesting, of course, because he dedicated apparently May, the month of May, in a proclamation as Jewish Heritage Month, which seems a bit strange. To again have all of this sort of happening in the exact same month at the exact same time, I think it's a bit contradictory. I think that almost goes without saying. Again, the month of May has typically been Memorial Day month by and large. It's been surrounded with memorializing and remembering individuals who served in the armed forces and individuals who have fallen in the arm as a result of course, serving in the armed forces and things of that nature. But there is an important element to the rededication, which is the rededication here, again, basically makes our nation a sovereign nation, allegedly, as the story goes, from, of course, the British banking system, which, again, I believe is a real thing, and I think that's actually happened. So that's a good thing. Of course, that spits in the eyes of the Rothschilds and, other Jewish bankers, to say the least. But what's going on, even so, within our country domestically is highly confusing. And I'm not going to claim to know all the answers and all of the ins and outs, because I certainly don't. But as I've mentioned before, one of the very harmful things that consistently gets brought up is the data centers and the acquisition of land, typically as a result of eminent domain from the power companies that are running power lines through people's homes and through people's properties to, again, be directed toward these data centers. I recommend, again, if you're over on X, following Ainsley Brown, or Ainsley Brown, ANSLEYBROWN. She's based in Georgia, and she's been going, again, from neighborhood to neighborhood and home to home. And she's recording these individuals discussing, again, the Georgia power companies and how they're running power lines, again, through their property. And in some cases, just through a portion of their property, but even so, it's destroying their land. And then at the same time, the area around them, certainly the city or the power company themselves, are offering to pay for their property to, again, demolish it completely. And what they're offering them is far less than what the property is actually worth. This is the domestic issue, in my humble opinion, outside of course, the geopolitical landscape and a number of other things that are taking place. Of course, the wireless body area network, that's always a problem. But at the same time, this right here is one of the, and again, this is clearly part of the wireless body area network, data centers. I don't think there's any doubting that. But this is hands down one of the most depressing, I think, and really alarming issues that's not receiving any national attention whatsoever. It just isn't. Everybody in, again, alternative media, so to speak, online media, they're discussing this, but Fox News is not. CNN isn't covering this. Certainly your local outlets like ABC, CBS, NBC, they're not bringing any of this up. And there's a lot of movement being made in a lot of different directions here regarding all of this, but it's tyranny. And I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I've sort of Walter Mitty'd this for quite some time. That is, is this right here, is this particular issue, again, of data centers and land acquisition and destroying homes that people have worked their whole lives for and lived in their whole lives, to simply have it, again, ripped out from underneath them, is that the hill to die on? And I'll be blunt with you, I think that it is. Again, I understand that words are one thing and actions are another, but put yourself in those family situations just for a minute. You've worked your whole life, you own your home, or you're still paying off your home, you live on your property, you're still paying taxes on your property, which again is unconstitutional to say the least. And at the same time, you're being told by these data centers and these power companies running power lines and massive power lines that are going to run right through your home or a portion of your property to a data center. That what do you say to those power companies and how far can you take it? And again, is this the hill to die on? So, in Walter Mittying the entire thing, I mean, what would you say? I mean, me personally, I would be willing to lose my life over something like that. I think there are a great deal of Americans who would. And I think that they would lose their lives over it because this is how tyrannical many aspects of our government are, certainly domestically speaking, and certainly within the state and local level. So just for fun, if it is fun, it's certainly a vigilant exercise, I think, is run yourself through a scenario. You receive a letter in your mailbox that says, we're taking your property via eminent domain because we're going to run power lines through it, or we're going to run a data center right through your property, and it's going to be sitting on your property, so we're going to have to demolish a portion of your home or all of your home. Keeping in mind that if they only get rid of a portion of your property, those massive power lines are going to disrupt your entire lymphatic system. From a health standpoint, your likelihood of getting cancer is a whole lot higher. Your likelihood, again, of complete cell disruption within your entire circulatory system and your whole body is remarkably high. This is why people who live next to massive power lines, again, end up getting sick far more frequently. This is, again, the wireless body area network at its base level foundation. So you receive a letter in your mailbox that says you're going to do this. What's your next move? You go to city council and you say something like, if you believe that this power company is going to come through my property, bulldoze everything that I have, and I'm going to leave, you have another thing coming, you're going to have to kill me. If you say that, then they're going to be put on notice as police officers because they probably don't want to have to kill you. So the local police is going to be aware of who you are. Same thing with, again, any lawyer or entity having to do with the power company or the data center themselves or whomever. And then ultimately you get a letter maybe from them and there's more of just back and forth communication. But in the end, eventually, someone's going to show up on your property and attempt to destroy it and or arrest you for noncompliance of some kind. This too is tyrannical. Again, for me, just looking at it at face value, it seems completely tyrannical, which means what then? You get a knock on your door, you're armed to the teeth. You look at whoever it is that's knocking on your door, they probably have law enforcement around them, and they say, we need you to get off of this land because we're about to bulldoze it. Then you look back at them, if you want to say anything else, and you simply say, or maybe not simply, but you just say, you're going to have to kill me. And then what happens? They try to arrest you and pull you away from your own property, your own home, the things that you own. Then what do? If you start shooting, that's going to be the end of you, because if you're outnumbered greatly and you're not John Wick with John Wick skills, then that's going to be the end of you. But that would send a massive message to all Americans, would it not? That your home is your castle, and that this is your last stand against tyrannical government. I do not support data centers in the slightest. I'm just, again, straight up. What Donald Trump is doing with OpenAI and these AI systems and these massive data centers, I think is beyond tyrannical. Because I don't think that this Ainsley Brown gal in Georgia is lying. She's going from property owner to property owner, even, again, in areas where she doesn't live, interviewing these people, and these people are not lying. They have beautiful homes. People, again, they move out into the country to get away from this kind of stuff, to get away from the power lines, to get away from the factories, to get away from the pollution, the noise, the high cost, all of it. And then to have all of those things surround themselves around you again. That's the enemy at your front door and in your backyard. So for me personally, again, I'm not saying this to sound like some kind of a hard ass or anything. That's not it, or some kind of a tough guy. I'm simply saying that I don't think it gets any more American than making your home your last stand against tyrannical government, because it's either you or them. So I'm going to continue to pray for these people in Georgia and pray for all of the people surrounding these data centers and being affiliated with any of them, because they're an abomination. And more people, I think, need to stand up against them. Let people know that this is a real problem. And if you have a nice small little home on a nice wooded area, you're not safe. That there's not, you're not going to find peace there as long as policies and procedures like this exist, where they can simply do whatever they want with your land without your say. Americans are going to have to stand up to this eventually, more so than they already have. And again, if this is the hill to die on, and there are hills to die on, I can't think of a more important one. That's just my opinion. I haven't been put in that situation yet, like these people have, but these people have a decision to make. Take far less money for the value of your actual property and everything in it, and attempt to move somewhere else where you won't be surrounded by tyrannical government, which I'd say good luck to that, or make it your last stand. Now let me get into this too. Again, this had to do with Trump's comments when he was talking with Sean Hannity, and then even Brett Baer pressed him on the issue because, of course, it didn't sit well with Americans. Doesn't matter what dimension of thinking you engage in, it just doesn't sit well regardless of the dimension. When Donald Trump brought up that part of the deal with China, and deals that have been made with China and have already been made, is that China can continue to acquire farmland in the United States, and then, of course, bring over 500,000 students to where eventually, again, if they graduate and they're good students and they're law-abiding, as Donald Trump says, then they can become citizens. Again, making American land and confiscating American land for business, even with a, whatever you would call it, a veiled invasion of sorts, in order to prop up some American businesses and colleges and universities and some farmland, I think is a mistake, but I'm a novice. But even so, I decided to take those comments that he made and pop it into Grok and just see what the AI system actually said about it. Again, I'm not recommending using AI systems for everything, but when a comment like that is made, even a president of the United States can't necessarily get away with it, because if the facts don't check out and the numbers don't check out, then the comment is either, again, it's a lie, it's a purposeful lie. It could be, again, he could have stated it for some other reason for which we don't know. But as it turns out, both of those comments don't pan out. So here's what it said. I simply asked the question, quote, "Explain to me how China owning American farmland makes food prices fall, and how allowing 500,000 Chinese students into American colleges allows those colleges to remain." Here's what it said. Chinese ownership of U.S. farmland is extremely limited, and has no meaningful effect on national food prices, let alone one that drives them down. According to the latest USDA data, as of December 31st, 2023, Chinese investors hold 277,336 acres of U.S. agricultural land. That's less than 1% of all foreign-held farmland and roughly 0.02% of total privately held U.S. agricultural land, which totals about 1.3 billion acres. For context, foreign ownership overall is only approximately 3.5% of U.S. farmland, with Canada holding the largest share by far. Well, as we know, Canada is basically owned by China. They've sold themselves out to China too. Again, I'm just mentioning this at face value. I don't know any other hidden deals or veiled, not threats, but veiled approaches to what's actually happening here. And again, it could just be words. But I'm just bringing this to people's attention because the comments don't check out. It says the biggest Chinese-linked holdings are tied to private companies, for example, Smithfield Foods for pork processing and some wind energy leases in Texas, not the Chinese government. Holdings have actually declined in recent years. why the claim that it makes food prices fall doesn't hold up. It says economically, foreign investment in principle could increase food supply and exert downward pressure on prices through these channels. First, capital injection and efficiency gains. Foreign buyers, including Chinese entities, often invest in technology infrastructure or scale, for example, modernizing pork production at Smithfield. Higher productivity leads to more output, which leads to more supply on the market, which leads to potential price moderation. And then it says market competition. More players in farming processing can prevent domestic monopolies and keep costs down. However, with Chinese holdings at approximately 0.02% of U.S. farmland, any effect is statistically invisible at the national level. U.S. food prices are driven far more by factors like fuel, fertilizer costs, weather, labor shortages, inflation, export demand, and domestic policy, not this tiny slice of ownership. The U.S. is a massive net food exporter and produces far more than it consumes, so foreign ownership doesn't create shortages that would raise prices, and the scale here is too small to lower them noticeably either. In short, the mechanisms you're asking about exist in theory for large-scale foreign investment, but China's actual role is negligible. Claims of a big price-lowering effect are overstated. The reverse fear that it threatens U.S. food security is also overstated for the same reason, unquote. So if that's the case, and it's basically a giant go-around and a circle jerk for nothing, then what is it? What's the real point? Again, I'm not claiming that, and clearly it lays it out here, and references it, by the way, that China owns a very small percentage of U.S. farmland, or again, they own it and then they lease it back to a farmer, then basically, again, what is the point? What's the entire point of even making that a deal? Or again, was it really any kind of a deal? Now, over on GreatAwakening.win, an individual said this regarding this kind of a thing, because someone over there was asking the question, okay, what does this really mean? Now, they asked this question long after I asked it and asked it into an AI system, and I didn't participate in this online discussion, but this is what a person said. They said, quote, again, it's anonymous, you can take it with a grain of salt, but who's to say? They said, land surveyor here, and I have no horse in this race. I've surveyed many farms between 2004 and 2016 that were purchased from local landowners and sold to various hedge funds. Our farmers, quote unquote, the people that plant, irrigate, and harvest, rarely still their own land. They lease it. Beyond their skill in knowing how, they're basically heavy equipment operators, and local banks enjoy the financing for their near constant rollover of equipment. John Deere is most certainly a player here. Insurance companies and teacher/firefighter/county and state government retirement funds hold, quote unquote, the land for the growth in value and are simply landlords who lease the land to farmers and recreational hunters, fishers, skiers, ATV riders, etc. If those hedge funds have majority Chinese ownership, it's said, quote, the Chinese own it, exclamation point. Well, that's as much true as you are an owner, quote unquote, of Microsoft because of your 401k. It's land. One cannot load it up and haul it away. If China acts screwy, we can just plant crops on it without their involvement. Piss on them, basically. U.S. contract law is a thing, but national security is too. Now, failing to police their ownership activities is our failure. Banning their ownership isn't the way in a free market. And then they said that's their 2 cents, unquote. I understand that aspect also. And again, if they're leasing their land to China, then there has to be some kind of a deal with China that what they're growing on that land is at a lesser cost than, say, for example, what they would give it to an American if the American isn't leasing the land. But again, I think therein lies some of the rub. I'll be honest, again, this is a bit out of my ballpark, but at the same time, I just find it fascinating because part of me believes some of the things that are being said at face value, and then sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, there has to be some kind of another deal that's being made that we're not privy to, and we don't know all the specifics. And again, it's that aspect of it that is confusing. I think even for certainly any average American, myself included. So yeah, I'll get into the 500,000 Chinese students a little bit later here at the top of the education portion of the episode, but I just wanted to mention that right out of the gate, that as it turns out, Chinese ownership, quote unquote, isn't necessarily real ownership. It's just that they lease it to farmers at a lesser cost, which means they would get something in return at a lesser cost. That would be my guess. But they're not even the vast majority so-called, quote unquote, owners of American land. It's still Americans, which is great. Just so happens Canada owns a great deal as well. And then, of course, there was this angle, which adds another complexity to the whole thing, is that there's the constant discussion of, again, whether or not we can acquire any land or, of course, destroy any deal that takes place with a foreign nation regarding our own farmland. For example, in the state of Arkansas, allegedly, Governor Sanders over there has openly stated that no foreign country will have ownership or lease any land, any farmland within the state of Arkansas. So I don't know why that wouldn't be a national thing. If that's a bad thing, then why would that not be a nationwide policy? So again, like I said, I'm not gonna claim to know all the ins and outs, because there's no way that I would, but somebody has the real answer as to what it really means. And again, as far as driving food prices down, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. Again, here in Ohio in August is a great time to buy corn. It's a great time to buy Ohio corn. And the best places to buy Ohio corn, of course, are from individual farmers who farm it, again, for the people in their surrounding areas. They own the land. They don't lease the land to anybody. It's theirs. And then they sell the products from their own land. The question then becomes, how does someone get their product into a bigger store for people to buy? Because, of course, if that were the case, then those smaller farmers would have more money, because they would be able to sell their product at a higher cost if they wanted to. And of course, if the company, like a Kroger's, for example, or any other massive grocery store, wanted to actually obtain their product. But then doesn't that just mean that, again, your average American, myself included, and anybody else, would go directly to the farmer? I mean, why would you even bother shopping at a Kroger's if you can get the very product and the very food at a far less cost directly from the farmer without, of course, having to go through a massive box store of some kind or a massive grocery store? There are just so many hands in the cookie jar, certainly from a corporate level, that it's overwhelming. So I'm going to move on here, but speaking of overwhelming, and this is, again, part of this is interesting, and this is the double-edged sword of all of this, and again, a flip side to each coin. On Tuesday in Kentucky, you have Representative Thomas Massey's primary election, and he's running against an individual, again, who refuses to debate him, has been endorsed by Donald Trump, has been funded by AIPAC, and the whole thing. And this continues to be, again, a massive debate among individuals, is why is Donald Trump doing this? Why is he attacking Thomas Massey when Thomas Massey doesn't want funding for foreign wars? He doesn't want funding for Israel. He wants AIPAC to register as a foreign lobby, which they should, and they aren't. Which, of course, if they did, they would just break apart and then enter smaller groups and infiltrate the lobbying game probably a little more than they already do. I mean, if you think about it, TPUSA is its own lobby, so is CPAC and all those other conservative, quote-unquote, conferences and organizations. But again, they don't have to register as some kind of a foreign lobby, even though they certainly are. And that's where they get a great deal of their funding. But with that aside, again, people are asking the question why Donald Trump is attacking Thomas Massey. Is it because Massey's a bad person? I don't think that that's the case. I don't know everything about him, but it certainly doesn't seem to be the case. And then there's the aspect, again, of whether or not this is, again, a multiple dimension chess play that's being made in an effort to remind the American people that just because a person endorses somebody doesn't mean that that's the person that you should vote for. Again, I would appreciate it if Donald Trump would stay out of local elections. Again, by and large, he stayed out of the one here in Ohio. And even J.D. Vance voted for a treasurer who Vivek Ramaswamy did not support. Even J.D. Vance's pick ended up losing, and I voted for that guy. His name was Jay Edwards. But Vivek Ramaswamy's pick for treasurer ended up winning, which is unfortunate. But either way, is it reverse psychology, basically, in an effort to highlight the political infiltration of Israel with local elections and bring this all to the forefront while making it look like Thomas Massie is the enemy when in fact he's not? Again, I don't know if that's the case either, but I do know that it seems to be working to an extent because a great deal of people can see the infiltration and they're basically saying, hey, wait a minute, you're the president of the United States. You don't represent us here at the local level regarding what's bothering us. And the reason that we elect a representative at the local level is to represent our concerns and our interests at the local level in Washington, D.C. It's not to blindly support a president and their policies on everything that would end up impacting people at the local level. This, again, is part of the problem with the Republic. And even Plato and Socrates and Marcus Aurelius and Cicero and all the boys from back in the day, I mean, they even mention this as being a massive problem because, again, people can be blackmailed, they can be bought, they can be threatened. A lot of different things can take place, all of which are bad. But when you take a Thomas Massie primary run and you compare it with, say, for example, a Senator Bill Cassidy out of Louisiana, who ended up losing miserably, and he should have lost. I mean, this was a guy who voted to impeach Trump over nothing. Bill Cassidy is pro-vaccine, pro-COVID, he was pro-mask, he was pro-COVID shot, all of it. And he, of course, I believe, was a medical doctor. And he had to hold his breath to vote for RFK Jr. and vote for his confirmation to be HHS director. I mean, this guy's dirty, and he's an old rhino, and he's bought and sold, and John Thune wanted him to win, and so did a bunch of other people. And I should say this too, now that Cassidy has lost his primary to this Julia Letlow and a John Fleming, of which there's going to be a runoff, and it looks like this Julia Letlow gal's going to win, unless everybody who voted for Bill Cassidy votes for John Fleming, in which case Julia Letlow will lose by at least, 6,000 plus, maybe 8,000 some odd votes. Again, Julia Letlow will end up winning if that doesn't happen. But either way, regardless of the endorsements, you just have to look at a person's actual voting record and what they've actually stood up for. And one of the things, of course, that gets twisted about Thomas Massie is that he's voted for and voted against particular things that are thrown into massive, bigger bills, where instead, say, for example, you just wanted to vote for lower taxes. Well, then that should be its own bill. And that's always been a thing that Thomas Massie has always advocated for. Why is it that we're always throwing all of these extra deals and extra provisions, pork, so to speak, inside of these bills? And that's because, again, everybody wants their piece of the pie. Everybody wants a little cut. But it's politicians, it's not us. They give us a bone every now and again, but they sit down for the steak. They throw us a little bit of gristle and say, this will do you just fine. This is what you've asked for. Congratulations. Meanwhile, they get a second, a third course, and a dessert as a politician. This is the problem. So again, I'm glad that Cassidy's gone, but with him gone, good luck getting the Save America Act. Good luck getting it before January of next year. I don't think that's going to happen now. Again, I don't know that for certain. I'm just taking a guess. If they already didn't have the votes, and if Bill Cassidy wasn't going to vote for it to begin with, what makes anybody think he's going to vote for it now? Now that Donald Trump's bashing him on Truth Social and celebrating the fact that he's basically out of politics for the rest of his life and so on and so forth. I mean, if you can't win a Senate primary and you lose to two other individuals handedly, then that's a serious problem. But again, I'm not defending Bill Cassidy by any stretch, but if Massie doesn't win, that will show you that the Jewish lobby has a stranglehold on just about everybody, and that's beyond terrible. Because at the end of the day, it's up to local voters to, again, make their own logical decisions. To not just, again, watch a Fox News and be like, well, Donald Trump said so we have to do this, or Fox News said so we have to do this. People need to think for themselves and start, again, voting as morally as they possibly can. Who's the moral candidate? Who's the individual that doesn't want your money wasted, your property stolen, and your life shortened? I understand that voting is a farce in a great many cases. I understand it's rigged. I understand that's still a thing. That's always going to be a thing. I don't think that there's any one singular measure that would stop any of it from actually happening, certainly as long as it's digital. Again, we saw even paper ballots can be fraudulently counted depending on who's doing the counting, regardless of how many paper ballots even exist. But I know that Donald Trump's advocated for one-day voting, paper ballots. Everybody gets the day off, so everybody has a chance to vote. If you have to stand in line, so be it. But the votes are counted the exact same day, right then and there on the spot. Again, I would appreciate that. That would be a great thing. I don't think anybody would necessarily doubt that. Voter ID, only citizens can vote. You would have to arrest a great deal of people. Again, he openly claims again in the future that the way that it was set up during the 2024 election, that there are lawyers everywhere monitoring everything, and that if somebody attempts to break the law, a boatload of lawyers are going to show up and say you're breaking the law, those votes won't be counted, and then all of a sudden, correct votes are counted appropriately, and then the individual who was actually going to win the race actually wins. You would assume, again, that that's going to be the case this time around also. But the Massey element, and again, this entire story of him exposing AIPAC and the Jewish lobby and the AIPAC handlers and all of that in both Tucker Carlson interviews, and then, of course, as he's talking with the public and his own constituents in the area where he lives, who have voted for him multiple times over. I don't know why anyone would abandon their vote of him when those individuals at the local level are seeing how corrupt it is at the local level. Plucking a guy seemingly out of nowhere who's a quote-unquote Navy SEAL, but doesn't want to debate? See, that's a huge red flag for me, and you would think it'd be a huge red flag for just about anybody. You should want to debate. If you have the truth on your side, let's have it. Massey wanted 8 debates. This guy wanted none. There's a reason for that. So I hope the people of Kentucky make the right decision. I hope they vote for Thomas Massey. And I hope Massey continues to advocate for one issue, one bill every single time, because that really is the way that it should be. If you want lower taxes nationwide, then that should be the bill. Name it that. Make it a one-sentence bill. We're going to lower taxes by this percentage or eliminate taxes. Now let's vote for it. And then they should. Which should tell everybody, again, when it's not that simple, it's always corrupt. Because it could be that simple. Because it's supposed to be that simple. So I'll leave it there. Again, I just encourage people who live there to do the right thing. Thomas Massey was even apologizing to people who live in the Cincinnati area because his opponent and the Jewish lobby threw up millions of dollars to run ads even in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he doesn't even live in Cincinnati and isn't representing Cincinnati. I mean, it's a completely different state. But because people travel to and fro between the old Ohio River there, he knows that a lot of people, again, who listen to the radio or watch screens on television throughout the course of the day actually vote and live in Kentucky and vice versa. So, I don't know. It's a dirty game. But the American people should be the ones who have the say in an honest system. We'll see what happens. Okay. Regarding Chud the Builder, I'm going to say this. I still don't know all the ins and outs. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened with the particular event. But when you can stand back and look at it from a 30,000-foot view, it's an interesting conflict and a very quick, interesting lesson on how the media portrays individuals. They, of course, portray him as being racist. He clearly is not. He uses racial slurs, but that doesn't make a person racist. At the exact same time, again, there's plenty of footage of him interacting cordially with Black Americans and a number of other Americans of different races. But because, again, I wasn't there, I don't know all of the ins and outs. There's rumors, again, that the whole thing was recorded. And then on the flip side of that coin, people are saying that he deleted some of the footage and that, he's tampering with evidence because he was really in the wrong. Individuals were painting the individual who got shot in the stomach, this black man, as being an innocent veteran. that he's a military veteran, and that he was, again, innocently attacked. I find that hard to believe. Defending yourself is one thing, but being innocently attacked by Dalton Etherly isn't something that's occurred, certainly not on film. People were saying that he was just outside of the courthouse for no reason, that Dalton Etherly was out there for no reason. And the flip side of the coin is people say that he was there because he was paying a fine, or that he was there for official court business for something else, or that he was just going for a walk and going for a stroll. And that's just one of the things that he does, because that's not a crime either. So again, people know who he is in public. And there's an interesting element to that, which I'm going to get to here in just a second. But apparently, again, he's still behind bars. He's raised on Give, Send, Go well over $225,000, $230,000 and growing. There's a fake account out there that somebody's trying to grift off of, which is beyond terrible. But he's apparently, again, there's going to be some other court hearing on the 21st of May. And then after that, there's going to be a trial relatively quickly, if I'm not mistaken, like May 26th. So something along those lines. Again, this is also where, unfortunately, a bunch of people stick their nose where it doesn't belong. And these are individuals, again, who are associated with larger corporations and larger groups. For example, Jason Whitlock. Okay, large black guy, sports commentator for The Blaze. But he injects himself in social issues because he fancies himself as being some social experiment expert or societal expert or what have you. But he highlights his own hypocrisy with this particular case, because he decided to summarize the entire shooting and the entire assault as Chud the Builder is a CIA psychological operation. That all of this is just fake and it's just a giant setup to create either a race war of some kind or something else. Meanwhile, when it comes to sports ball, he has no problem talking about the unfair approach that the WNBA took with Caitlin Clark of the Indiana Fever, and all of the black players on other teams shoving her to the ground and knocking her down, and refs not calling these fouls and a number of other things, and then ultimately saying they're doing it because she's white. See, he doesn't have a problem bringing that up, which was rather obvious. But if somebody name calls from time to time and highlights a larger societal problem on the streets of name calling, and then people flipping out who happen to have lower IQs and are far more impulsive and more drawn to violent behavior, then that's somehow a problem. So again, I wasn't there. I don't know the ins and outs, but I do know the statistics, and I do know the double standard in our legal system. And it's massive, because it was approximately a year ago when a white student, football player of a high school, was stabbed in the heart and then multiple times by a black teenager by the name of Carmelo Anthony. And Carmelo Anthony, again, killed him right there on the spot intentionally with a knife, rather personal, up close. And then he received a $250,000 bond. A bunch of money was raised for him in the millions. A home was purchased. And he's basically been on house arrest playing video games in the basement of this home until his trial actually occurs, where he actually killed somebody. But he's not in jail. Dalton Etherly didn't kill anybody. There was a physical altercation, clearly. It could be argued that both sides were defending one another. Who's to say? Again, some people were saying that Dalton was the aggressor initially. Other people were saying, no, this guy followed Dalton, kept threatening him, and then it was actually the first person to make physical contact with Dalton, and then they started to fight, started to wrestle, and then, he got shot in the stomach. And he's still alive. But he's behind bars. Have they arrested the other guy? Does anybody know that? And like I said in the last episode, there's this element too regarding the case, and this will be the last thing I say about it before, I hear anything else, because again, this is an interesting dynamic in our country. The dual justice system and us not having equal protection under the law is a serious problem, regardless of the race. But again, the different standards they have for different races, that's the alarming part. This is Agorist over on X Cancel, formerly called Knitter. And it says the following. They said Chud was likely bumped by FBI. Obligated to be at court over appetizer case, leaves and is harassed, then attacked. Member of O'Keefe video, quote, "We can put anybody in prison. We call it a nudge," unquote. And then they just said, yeah. Then they went on and said appetizer case in Nashville is because he was trespassed by the owner who did not bring the bill. He was obligated to leave immediately, which in that particular case, he was told to leave without even being able to pay. And then he said, but I didn't even get to pay. You just brought my appetizer and I didn't even get to pay. And then, of course, they kicked him out before he could even pay. And then the person goes on and says, FBI says, quote, "You should stop this, could start race riot," quote unquote, or quote, "You stole appetizers," quote unquote. Chud stands on First Amendment, now obligated to court. FBI bumps via proxy outside court. Then there is this angle. They want to use something typically used to keep drug money from freeing drug dealers. It does not work for normal crowdfunded with legit money, though. They still want to process to lengthen to keep him bleed his pockets. Case in point, he's not apparently allowed to use his GoFundMe cash to bail himself out. And then, of course, there was a lawyer discussing this in my last war video, and he was saying if his bond has been set at $100,000 or $1 million, I'm sorry, it was $1 million. If it was set at $1 million and he has $100,000, which is 10%, that's what the bail bondsman gets. But because of the high-profile nature of the case, people are going to want some collateral on that particular bail bond. So basically, again, if he doesn't have $500,000 in assets, for example, which it's not that it would be stolen from him, it's that it would eventually be given back. But it would just be used as, again, just hung there as collateral to basically say that if he runs or he avoids court or whatever, then his assets will be seized. I don't see this individual running from court. I don't see him skipping out on a court date or fleeing the country. That's not going to happen. But again, in a case like this, he didn't kill anybody. Getting back to this person's post, they said the following, seems Fed informant stream sniped Chud in real life with the appetizer theft trespass case, implying again that that was all a setup. They stream sniped him. That's an interesting phrase to put it. I've never heard of that, but that makes sense. They bumped him, made death threats, talked to police on cam, and his 2-time appetizer theft is picked up by the FBI. Why I say this is informant. Then bumped again at court. And then they went on and said, and then there's this. Totally unnecessary, negligent, in my opinion, in reality, probably closer to malicious misconduct. Fed informants used to bump are probably not contract killers. So here's the point that they're making, if none of that made any sense. The point that they're making is that when you're a live streamer, or you have a show, or you have whatever, the feds can listen to your show, and they've probably listened to mine before. Why wouldn't they? They certainly did after my school board speech, hence the high views of my show, and then far less now. But at the same time, if I was a live streamer and I was doing things like what Dalton Etherly does or what other people do, they would basically search for what your interests are. And then places you go and things that you do, and they might even follow you on a flock camera from place to place or whatever, or again, figure out where you're going to be in the future. And then they set things up a particular way by showing up, whispering to somebody's ear, maybe paying somebody under the table to set a person up. Because they know how the person is going to emotionally react. If you know how a person is going to emotionally react before they enter a particular situation, then you can manipulate the environment and the situation to then lure the person in who's going to react a particular way. But when Dalton Etherly was arrested and cited for disorderly conduct and whatever they charged him with, failure to pay or theft of an appetizer or whatever, it's completely absurd. But again, he wasn't resisting arrest. He was just like, why am I being arrested? And he put his hands behind his back and they arrested him and detained him, and that was that. And then, of course, they let him go. But this is the nudge. This is the setting up the entire scenario to take somebody down, to, again, make a point to the American public that you're not free, that you're not free to walk around. You're not free to say what you want to say and go where you'd like to go, even if you're being civil. That if you're recording your movements, people who want to set you up for failure will know where you're going to go before you're going, because you've already told them where you're going to go and why you're going. Remember, again, making setups like this, if it wasn't set up, and of course, if he was set up in previous cases, doing such a thing is done to demoralize everybody. It's done to send a message that if you stand up for your rights and your constitutional rights, regardless of how you do it, if you do it legally, that's not good enough for the bad guys, because the bad guys will still do whatever they have to do to discourage Americans from doing that legally, because they don't want you to. That's the real psychological operation. If Jason Whitlock really wanted to engage in a psychological operation conversation, that's the real reason. And that's been going on for a very long time. So again, the psyops won't stop, but your rights don't have to stop either. And that's what people need to keep in mind. But understanding the complexity of a psyop, certainly, again, in the way that your average individual can be manipulated to be at a particular place at a particular time, and then have somebody do something to them, that's a very real element also. And that's a multidimensional level of thinking that a lot of people do not consider. Okay, education. I have a number of things. Let me start again back with the 500,000 Chinese students. Here's what Grok told me. It said the following: how 500,000 approximate Chinese students, actually it amounts to more like 266,000 to 277,000 as of recently, help keep U.S. colleges financially viable. It says the following: keep in mind, I'm an abolitionist. I would like colleges and universities to cease to exist. Certainly, again, making them all on more of a level playing field to a great extent. That way we wouldn't even need to bring in foreigners to be students, again, and pay massive amounts of tuition up front, which ultimately just fund the individuals who run these particular organizations. But with that said, it said the following. It said the number of Chinese students in the United States peaked around 300,000 plus pre-pandemic years, and is now roughly 266,000 to 277,000 as of the 24-25 academic year, still making China the second largest source of international students after India. Yuck. It says your 500,000 figure is a bit high, but directionally right for the scale of the discussion. It says here's the clear economic mechanism that lets many colleges remain, quote-unquote, stay open, maintain programs, and avoid deep cuts or closures. It says full-price tuition subsidy is the first one. International students, especially from China, almost always pay full sticker price tuition, often 2 to 3 times what in-state domestic students pay at public universities, and without access to most U.S. government financial aid or need-based discounts. At many schools, they generate net revenue per student far higher than domestic enrollees. To that, I say, who cares? It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, again, colleges and universities are businesses, and if you have a foreigner who has a bigger check in their hand than an American, an actual American citizen, who again is going to be either paying out of pocket as they go, or they're going to make a student loan. I mean, the university is going to get their money anyway. But if you ever see a big building just be erected on a college campus, that's not from student loans. That's from foreign money. Every single time. That's colleges and universities pocketing that foreign money and saying, you know what we could use? Another building, or a new lab, or a new school of study, or a new stadium, or a new this or a new that. That isn't domestic cash. That's foreign money. The next one here is cross-subsidizing. It says that extra revenue helps cover the university's fixed costs, like faculty salaries, labs, buildings, administration, etc. It effectively subsidizes domestic students who receive aid, scholarships, or lower in-state rates. Without this influx, many public and private colleges would have to raise tuition for everyone, cut programs, or shrink enrollment. Broader economic support is the next one, which is Chinese students plus their families' spending contribute billions directly to college budgets and the wider economy historically, approximately 14 to 15 billion annually from Chinese students alone, part of the approximate 43 to 44 billion total from all international students. This supports jobs, roughly 1 U.S. job per 3 international students, and keeps smaller or mid-tier schools afloat amid declining domestic birth rates and enrollment drops. See, that's the part that I don't care about. If smaller colleges and universities are getting crushed because of lower birth rates and not enough money, then what they need to be doing is spending more time trying to recruit domestic students to come to their universities and promise them a good education with a lower cost. Don't go to the big state university, like, for example, Ohio State University, and pay out the wazoo. But also don't go to a small, expensive school like Miami University and receive, again, an equally liberal communist education. Go to an even smaller college for far less money, and you'll walk away with the exact same degree, or, heaven forbid, if they still want to go to college, you do it online, where you're going to get the exact same degree that you would another place for way less. Or you enter the trades, or you start your own business without a college degree and you can bypass the entire system. See, this is the part that's not being discussed with American families. This is the part that's not being discussed with high school students, is they have, again, these career days and then, of course, these college days, but it's a lot of these massive colleges that show up, or even sometimes, again, community colleges. But the community colleges, of course, push even 4-year degrees, and that you can leave the community college with a 2-year degree and then go to a 4-year school and so on and so on. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, to each their own. But bringing in Chinese students, and a great deal of them, who do you think a big university is going to take? Your student loan, or millions from a Chinese student? And what would, again, amount to essentially straight cash right up front. It wrapped up here. It said many universities, especially less selective public flagships and private schools, have become structurally dependent on this revenue stream. Using a large share of Chinese or other full-paying international students would force budget shortfalls, program eliminations, or even campus closures at some institutions. Again, to that I say, so what? It's a classic case of price discrimination of higher ed. Charge the price incentive customers, international students, more to keep the system sustainable for everyone. But see, here's what they're leaving out. It's a broken system. There's not much of a return on investment, if any. The programs that exist by and large are failing not because of a lack of enrollment, but what is driving that lack of enrollment? What's driving the lack of enrollment is incompetence. And it's the Great Awakening. It's awareness. It's people living in a time where they are more awake to their surrounding world than ever before. It's not everybody, unfortunately, because if it were, there wouldn't be a single television in anybody's home. But, among other things, sports ball would cease to exist and 1,000 other things. But there is an awakening taking place here that cannot be understated. And when people learn the truth about what things cost and then what they're receiving for that cost, they weigh that and they go, you know what? I don't think so. Because if it walks like a duck and it smells like a duck, and then I'm looking over there and I'm looking at these ducks and they're all quacking like ducks, do I want my child to be a duck? And the fact is a lot of families are saying no, they don't. That's why it's depressing for me. Because when I drive around Miami University's campus, which is never, but when I do, you see the same kind of person. They're dressed the same. Everybody's wearing pajamas or gym clothes by and large. That's apparently the going fashion for if you're walking around in public. They have the earbuds in, and they're wireless, of course, and they're staring at their cell phone. That's it. I just see people in the matrix. I see people not understanding that they don't have to come here to receive an education. They can do it from the comfort of their own home and learn far more at a faster pace in less time than if they attend a brick and mortar college. That, again, is what I refer to as the cycle of abuse. That's familial cyclical behavior. I went to Miami University, or I went to this school, so I need to send my kids there, and they're going to send their kids there and their kids there, and that's the way that it's always going to be. That's nuts. That's just nuts. I've always thought that's nuts. I'll tell you what's even more crazy, and this is hilarious. I don't live that far from the airport, which is out in rural farmland here in town. And because this is graduation weekend from Miami University, and again, families come in, families come out, the most brainwashed people are the people who either own or rent a private plane to fly in and fly their kids in and out of the university. Imagine that. Imagine the cost of that. And then, of course, the fact that they're sending their child to a university to begin with, a brick and mortar institution, when there's a family who's, again, getting the same degree online while their child also has a job at a fraction of the cost in a fraction of the time within the confines of their own home in their own area, wherever it is that they live. That's an entire family that's not wasting money. That's an entire family that has it figured out. So it just, I don't know. The whole thing blows me away. But I don't think that bringing Chinese students into our country for the purposes of propping up some smaller or even larger universities is a good idea. Because you're assuming that money is going to be spent appropriately. And let's face it, what dollar in the American education system, quote unquote, is spent appropriately? The jokes write themselves. I don't even have to say anything. Case in point, my latest Substack article titled "The Absurdity of Alpha Schools," a $40,000 Silicon Valley grift that's selling parents on screen time. I'll leave the article for you. It'll be linked in the description below. I highly recommend it. Just in quick summary, Alpha schools are a big business conglomerate that charges, again, at least $40,000 in tuition per year, upwards of $75,000. K through 12, it's as low as $10,000 depending on the small little magnet school that they might have. But again, they sell it on, you're only on an AI system for instruction for approximately 2 hours a day, and then you spend the next 6 hours either learning how to cook, learning how to clean, doing other things in XYZ. The model is a homeschooling model, but the price is where the grift is, because it's still daycare, and I don't know who would spend $40,000 a year for any kind of a school, let alone a school like this, when you can do this from home for practically nothing. Again, a yearly tuition at a Becca from kindergarten through the vast majority of middle school is approximately $100 a month, and it's less than that. It's like $58 a month for kindergarten, and I have all the prices laid out in the article. Again, kindergarten for Rebecca, for example, their accredited program is $98 a month. For grades 1 through 6, it's $148 a month. For grades 7 through 8, it's $175 a month. And for grades 9 through 12 at Rebecca for their accredited program, it's $188 a month. Now you can spend that, which again is approximately $2,200 per year, or you can spend $40,000 a year. But see, at the Alpha schools, what you're paying for is daycare. So it's a combination of the homeschooling way of learning, self-directed, partially online, and then the other stuff, again, learning some things online and then doing it in the real world. Cooking, cleaning, maintaining a home, landscaping, exploring the outside, a number of different things. Field trips, all of that. That's what a homeschool environment or even a classical curriculum environment would do, but not for $40,000 plus a year. And as I lay out in the episode also, they get screen time on Fox News. The Alpha Schools program gets a lot of promotional time on Fox News, which means they're in each other's pockets. It's the illusion of school choice. It's school choice, but it's not worth it because their children could be doing that at home for far less on their own. So there's that. Again, I'll link that article in the description below. Feel free and check that out if you're interested. Okay. Funny story here. As I brought up in previous episodes, this is the time of year where graduations start to take place, high school, college graduations, commencement speeches, the whole thing. There's another element that takes place, which is called Senior Prank Day. And apparently this is still a thing. Excuse me again, not sure why this is still a thing. You would think that people would learn that this is just idiotic. But it's not. In the local school district where I live, Talawanda City Schools, Oxford, Ohio, an abomination of a school district and poorly led top to bottom, inside and out. They apparently decided to have a senior prank day, and the superintendent allowed it, and the school principal, Scott Davey, allowed it. Again, I can't even wrap my head around this level of stupidity for a variety of reasons, so give me some time because this is a funny story and it's going to take some time. I believe it was not this past Friday, but the Friday before. Seniors were allowed to show up to school for a couple of hours, trash the building, and then leave. I'm not kidding. They show up for some senior sunrise thing, which sounds pretty gay, and they show up at school, and they sit on the football field or something like that, and they watch the sunrise. Like one last time, like it matters. Again, it's pathetic. And then they get to walk through the building and basically vandalize the whole place. But there's only certain forms of vandalism that are allowed. And they all have to be apparently approved by the school principal, of which he only apparently approved one, which involved pulling the desks from classrooms out into the hallways. Again, seems stupid. And then what percentage of students actually participated in all of this? As it turns out, it was a lot of the so-called preppy students. The vast majority of students did the right thing and they slept in and they stayed home and they didn't care. But the valedictorians, the preppy students, the ones who, again, seem to believe that school is the be-all, end-all thing, they were the ones who participated, and it was the vast minority of them. I would go so far as to say the lower IQ individuals. But with that even said, one of the reasons that all of this gets set up is because the school principal allows it and the superintendent allows it. Now, here's what else happened. Not only did they pull desks out from underneath and they flipped desks over, and I heard that they flipped Danielle Mann, the famous Danielle Mann, the narcissistic psychopath, in my opinion, who, again, in her very famous TikTok videos from when Donald Trump won the 2024 election, she was all over the Gateway Pundit, the whole thing, for losing her mind. She kept her job. She shouldn't have, but she did. She, again, had all the students flipped her desks. And the funny part is that a lot of the teachers think that this is funny. Some of them don't, but some of them do. But what they don't understand is, even the ones who think that it's funny, is that it's actually a big slap in their face and a big middle finger to them because of all of the so-called social, emotional, relationship building, learning bullshit that takes place in school environments. It's a moment like this that should prove to them that students don't give a damn about them, that students don't care about the environment because they don't have a reason to. So when they say things like, well, you know, we care about students and we build relationships and we're friends with them and whatever else. Is that really how friends treat each other, is by vandalizing their own stuff? by, again, pretending just one day that the rules don't exist. It's funny because everybody is embarrassing in this entire situation. Like I said, the smartest person is the one who stays home. The smartest person is the one who leaves school early. The smartest person is the one who graduates early. The smartest person is the one who gets on with their life while other people are playing stupid games, like running around on a football field and stacking desks and flipping desks. They also, of course, apparently started to run around on the roof of the building, on the glass that shines down into the atriums of the building. And they were on the glass and on the ceiling of the actual multi-story building. And then the principal lost his mind, apparently. Started screaming and shouting and the whole thing. They suspended the students. They had to take their final exams and in-school suspension. They were threatened to not walk during graduation. Who cares? That's not a punishment. And then, a number of other things. But, they wanted to get the police involved, but you can't do that because they allowed for the activity to take place in the first place. Not all of the vandalism and not all of the so-called trespassing, but they allowed for enough of it that you can't get the police involved. These people are certifiable. Arrest them, arrest them. Well, wait a minute. You allowed for the activity, didn't you? Didn't you allow for the possibility for somebody to maybe fall through a glass ceiling and break their neck and their legs and their spine and everything else if they were to fall through? Didn't you allow for that to happen? The school principal would be the one who was arrested. The superintendent would be the one who was arrested, while the person with a broken spine is being wheeled to a hospital. And then students took a bunch of their notebook papers and they saved them throughout the entire year, and they littered the entire school grounds with them on the inside of the building, threw them from multiple stores up all the way down into the atrium area and the whole thing. And then the custodians were the ones who had to pick it all up. This is the low IQ, stupid environment that is the American public school system in a nutshell. And they're not the only ones to engage in such things. Not in this school district. This happens all over the nation on a constant basis. Now, I'm going to read you a few of these because, again, there were at least 4 that are mentioned here on this AI system, and I asked them to scour the internet to see, again, what were newsworthy and even ones that were not. But a lot of these, of course, were newsworthy. Again, it's like clockwork. This happens. This happens every year. It happens every year, and these school districts don't learn. They just don't learn. They don't say, "Okay, seniors, it's your last day. Have a nice day." Kick them out of the building and then lock the doors. They actually, again, allow them to engage in these kinds of pranks, and they don't even give them an advanced organizer and say, if you engage in some kind of a prank or vandalism on this property, you're going to be arrested and you're going to be charged to the fullest extent of the law. They don't even do that. A lot of school districts don't even do that. Like I said, here at Talawanda, they just advocate for it. And then they assume that if you give them an inch, they won't take a mile. But they always do. And then they cry foul. "I can't believe you do that. I thought we were friends. All this relationship building I did as a school employee, we were supposed to be friends. You were supposed to respect me." They hate you. They hate you. And now they're leaving, and they know that there's no consequences for them, spitting in your face now. What do you expect? This is where I think the kids are going to be all right. I really do. It's moments like this where I'm like, yeah, you're stupid because you decided to go, but at least when you went, you shit all over the place. That's fine by me. If the adults who run the joint are dumb enough to allow it to happen, then they're dumb enough to accept the consequences. So here's a few, again, other ones that were mentioned. All this year, all oddly enough, within this past week, by and large. Let's see. Davidson Township, Michigan. They had water wars and a senior assassination prank. This happened in, again, I believe just last week. Students playing a water wars game using squirt guns to eliminate targets led to near-miss incident. A student hiding in a yard jumped out and sprayed a responding police officer with a squirt gun during a suspicious activity, possible burglary call. A kid could have gotten killed. Hilarious. Again, Body cam video showed the officer nearly firing in self-defense, but holding back in milliseconds. Police praised the officer. The incident raised safety concerns with additional calls for speeding, trespassing, and disruptions. The school district urged students to stop the game. Well, did you warn them in the first place? Did you tell them? It proves it, does it not? That the school environment never teaches consequences. They just don't do it. The other thing that happened too at Talawanda on their prank day, which was hilarious, was apparently they had a water balloon fight and a slip and slide. And some Karen teacher ran out there and was like, if you go down that slip and slide, none of you are graduating. And they basically all turned at her and gave her the finger, and then they all went down the slip and slide anyway. It's perfect. I just love it. It's hilarious. I love this stuff. Number 2, May River High School, Bluffton, South Carolina. The pig prank. This happens all the time too. Hell, this happened at my cousin's high school in Lakeland, Florida. This was on May 15th of 2026, however, and it says pigs were released inside the school as part of a senior prank, causing significant vandalism and a mess. The school closed early for cleanup. Bluffton police investigated it as a possible senior prank gone wrong involving property damage. Police sought information and potential charges / restitution. Now, with that aside, apparently students in the, students in the Talawanda thing regarding throwing all the papers on the ground when they weren't supposed to, and then the custodian, and then leaving and forcing the custodians to pick it all up and throw it all away. Apparently they had to come back for community service, quote unquote, just as far as the school system was concerned, or they couldn't walk. So these people are so brainwashed that they engaged in an activity that was at a level where they weren't supposed to engage in by throwing papers down into the atrium. And then they were threatened with not being able to walk. So they had to show up and engage in school-sanctioned community service. And they actually did it. Again, this is the absurdity, again, of the entire school system thinking that they are law enforcement, that they can, again, force community service on people. You could avoid all of this bullshit if you just did the right thing from the start, but they don't. And in the last board meeting, of course, they never even brought any of this up. Well, it was a great school year and everybody did well and we're looking forward to graduation and we'll see you at graduation and blah, blah, blah. Embarrassing. Here's the next one. Bishop Ward High School, Kansas City, Kansas, early May of this year, around May 7th and 8th. A group of seniors, possibly a significant portion of the class, allegedly broke into the school after hours, vandalized classrooms, overturned tables, threw eggs, ripped textbooks, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, allow my digression here, but if schools were doing the right thing, this wouldn't be the response from the customers of the schools, would it? If schools were moral, ethically sound environments with moral and ethically sound people, would this be the last response of a group of people who have been attending this entire time? Or is that the accurate response of a citizenry that despises school-sanctioned instruction and government-sanctioned instruction, thereby spitting in the face of government as a whole? I think the latter is the answer. Again, that's what it should show you. It should show you that as a business, you're doing it wrong. And these behaviors, like I said, are not new. These date back decades and decades and decades and decades. This has been going on for a very, very long time. Number 4, it continues that one, the burglary. School was closed, police responded to a burglary report, and graduation was postponed. Police later closed the criminal investigation at the school's request because the school doesn't want to be the one that doesn't hold a graduation because, again, when push comes to shove, they always bend. And then it was handled internally, it says, with restitution, community service, and discipline. Involved students faced withheld diplomas and were barred from walking at the main ceremony. Ooh, you mean I don't get to dress up like a clown and stand next to everybody else and pretend like all these people cared about me? Give me a break. Here's the last one. Number 4, Free State High School, Lawrence, Kansas. Late April of 2026, a person in camouflage carrying what appeared to be a gun, likely a prop from a prank or a game, was seen near the school. A concerned driver called 911, police responded, and the Lawrence Police Department warned students about prank safety. Yeah. But that's what the school's supposed to mention beforehand. And then the school is supposed to say, we're not having any senior pranks. And if you do, you're going to be arrested. It's that simple. See, the last day for seniors for classes and final exams should be their last day. That's it. Get them out of the building. Go home. Go do whatever the hell you want to do. But don't come back and be allowed to vandalize the place like at Talawanda. Absolutely hilarious and absolutely stupid. This wrapped up here. It said other mentions include general police warnings about senior assassin games in places like Virginia Beach and Boca Raton earlier in 2026, with concerns over trespassing and safety, but fewer specific incidents tied to news headlines. It says harmless or lower profile pranks like bagpipers following principals or decorations circulated on social media but rarely involved police. Yeah. This is a year in, year out thing. I think it's funny because it's stupid. And I think it's stupid because it is, number one, because the people who run the buildings are stupid. And they don't know the first thing about being proactive and stopping such a thing from happening. It isn't complicated. You just say the word no. But as I've said, and as you know, this is not the environment that enjoys the word no. And then they wonder why all the bad shit happens to them. It's not complicated. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. It's going to continue to happen. Every school across the nation, I'm telling you, things are going to continue to get interesting with all these graduations and everything else that takes place within these weird environments. With all that said, check out the Substack if you're interested. Move that along if you want to, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.